Welcome to Play the Man Podcast, a podcast seeking to build sturdy men in a wobbly world.
Welcome back, and we're here talking with Pastor Shane and Pastor Peter on the Play the Man Podcast, and today we've got a different topic. Today we're talking about Jordan Peterson. I'm surprised, but maybe not. So I think the question on the table is, should Christians listen to Jordan Peterson? Those of you who are not familiar with Jordan Peterson, he's a current modern day, I guess I'd call him like an intellectual, public intellectual. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair?
That is.
I don't know who to apply that phrase to anymore, but public intellectual, he's an academic, right? And he's developed a kind of an insane and intense following for good reason. Anyways, what do you guys think? Should Christians listen to Jordan Peterson?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is some old Army friend's son was coming through. Like, he's in his young 20s, and he was coming through from Kansas, going back down to Texas. He stopped at our place. He was going to spend the night. And he comes in, and he and I are just shooting the breeze. And he says, he goes, "This book has changed my life." And it was that book of, like Clean Your Room or the 12 steps.
12,
yeah, 12 whatever. And I said, "No, let's sit down and talk about this."
Yeah.
And he goes, "I have needed to hear this my whole life. This literally changed." And I'm like, it's kind of scary. It sounds a little bit cultic, you know, and let's kind of get into it. What have you learned? And just things of accountability, responsibility, stewardship, all these things that, Peterson was hammering home that I think fell into the stomach of men who are hungry to figure out, who they are, what they need to be, how to act, what are their priorities as young men.
Because if you read the book, it's something that probably most 8-year-old boys would learn from their dad.
Right.
But we have a whole generation of boys who never had dads, and so it's just like something as simple as stand up straight, make your bed is profound, and it is. It's something that's gone missing, and he's been a father figure now to millions of men who haven't learned what it means to be a man, and it says something about him, and I think it says something about kind of the failure of the church, the failure of fatherhood, other things in our society. So,
Why do you think Peterson?
I think it's because of courage. If you think about even how he came about, it was over the whole pronoun debate.
Oh yeah,
that's right. In Canada, and he was the one who stood up and said, "I'm a professor. I will not use those pronouns." And then he got some traction, and then I'm trying to remember the interview he had where it was a complete ambush.
Yeah.
But he held his own. He flipped the script, and he was just the courage and.
The one where he said "gotcha," and the news anchor was just totally speechless.
Yeah, there was, I don't remember the entire interview, but it was just one of those things where you realize, like, he's a man of integrity.
Yeah.
He's a man of courage, and people follow courage.
Yeah,
they do, and it doesn't matter if you're an atheist or a Christian. People follow courage, and that's, I think, how he got as popular as he did.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think you're spot on with courage. He was, and this is, it's kind of embarrassing for the church, but he was the lone man for a while against the tide on this issue.
Yeah.
Like there was a moment, and this was, I don't know, several years ago when this occurred, obviously, but for a while, publicly, he was kind of the man standing the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, content-wise, so I think courage is a big part of it, right? Because content-wise, are the arguments different? Are they new? Are they, it seems, I think one of the strengths of him, and this is something I feel like we lack everywhere we look for advice, is how prescriptive some of his things are, how black and white it is. That's something that's that empty stomach you had mentioned, right?
Right.
Someone to say, no, getting up and making your bed's a valuable skill, and it's a valuable thing to do, and there's something that you gain by doing that. You gain confidence, you gain esteem, you gain the ability to be courageous someday, and it starts by you waking up and owning the fact that you need to fix your bed.
Right.
That's so prescriptive. I don't hear advice like that, right? Not really. You want to get advice, people like, well, make your bed if you feel like it.
Right.
Like, what? That's not advice at all.
Right. No, I think you touched something important there. It's just like, in the Army, we talk about posture is important, and it's more than just your spine. But certain things, like when a commanding officer comes in, everyone stands up, but there's a crispness to everything. And you could say, oh, come on, kind of go through the motions. If you're busy, making your bed might sound like going through the motion, but it's those things that it builds this confidence, it builds a sense of order. It's changing, right? It has a change factor.
Yeah.
Well, I think of that saying too. Everybody wants to save the world, but nobody wants to help mom with the dishes.
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which that making your bed, doing the dishes, doing those things is actually preparing you to change the world or save the world or whatever big thing you want to do. But we do live in this time now where everybody thinks big about what they want to do, what they want to be, but nobody wants to do the little things that it actually takes to get there.
Right.
And I think that's part of Peterson's appeal as well.
Yeah.
I think too, he's very compassionate too. I think that's another. He's this manly man who's courageous, but you see him interact with people. You see him interact with young men, and there is a deep compassion for a bunch of boys who are lost in this generation. I think he feels that. I think it's real. It comes across. It's authentic. And I think that's another thing that just draws people in, and they gravitate towards him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that iconic YouTube video. He's just got his computer screen and he's speaking about issues of men and kind of the suffering that things are going through. And, he's got tears coming down his face and his voice is cracking and people are watching this like, he really cares. Like, this is coming from the heart.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think is so helpful that he talks about, and it feels like no one talks about this, is accountability, right? These building blocks to get to a place where you're courageous or where you're contributing to society or whatever. It starts with these mundane things like helping mom with dishes, and there's this whole like vacuum of the concept of accountability. Like, no one's accountable to that conversation. Here's one I think we're failing all over the place, and that is like, especially in a larger city, and I just came from a larger city, you don't necessarily go knock on your neighbor's door to go ask about their dog. You may call the police to do that, which is nuts. The police don't want to do that. They want to know what you did to go ask your neighbor about the dog. This is a civil matter. This is a neighborly matter. And it's really only solved by being a neighbor. But people are avoiding this, right? And they're trying to use other means like the government to just avoid these accountability-driven sort of interactions. Oof, tough, right? And I think to your point, a lot of this has to do, with young men. They need to know there is something to be accountable to. How strange to say that out loud.
Well, isn't it interesting when someone does how attractive it is to young men?
Yeah.
Like, everybody thinks they want to just lay around, play video games all day and things like that. And then someone actually does call them to accountability, and it's like, this is what I've been waiting for. Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, the accountability, the responsibility part is that change factor. It's the empowering element. We're like victimhood, you could say, instead of accountability. Be accountable, be responsible, or be the victim. The victimhood thing is draining. It's sapping you of strength.
I am, for one, glad he had all those public statements around the pronoun conversation, because at the time, I recall, I was like, I need words. People are assaulting me about this, and I'm not sure what it means. Do I take it seriously? And you don't know, because everyone's just saying things about pronouns, and then you see emotional attachment to this, and you're like, how do I apply regular logic, just normal rules that I would normally apply, because of these nuanced, I'd say nuanced woke things. It forces you to reapply logic, and they get you there. If you don't reapply logic the right way, they get you. And so I think that it's helpful to have both Christians and pundits providing language Otherwise, who's helping you understand how to engage respectfully with a coworker? And if they want to make the pronoun a conversation, how to make that a good conversation, a healthy one. I even think that's pretty hard in general.
Right.
I mean, and so it's good to have guys like Peterson, I think, standing up. That's a courageous thing to stand against. Because publicly it was kind of you kind of accepted that slippery slope.
Right.
Well, that's how it felt.
Yeah, and it was before that. No one heard of Jordan Peterson.
No.
He was some psychologist, academic in Canada. No one heard of him. But his perspective on that is, even as someone who didn't profess to be a Christian, he says, this is more than just culture or being polite or just, hey, Jordan, stop being so stubborn. He said, this is language. He goes, and I'm not going to lie as I speak. And this is illogical. And it's what it comes down to is truth. And he says, I'm not going to speak an untruth because that is very caustic.
Yeah.
It leads to other things.
Yeah.
And he stood his ground.
Well, I think that's fascinating about his background too, is that he studied communism, he studied Solzhenitsyn, he studied this whole thing of, if they can get you to say the sky is green and the grass is blue, they've already stole your soul at some point, and they've got you.
Well, his
and
house
if they
is
can
full
do
of
that
pictures,
with exactly.
You're talking about the pictures of Mao and Stalin, and these
all
are
the
sort
communist propaganda, things like that. That is in his house as kind of a reminder of
exactly.
And so he saw the long game too of where this could go, what it was doing, what was really at stake, and it's more than just pronouns. It's about someone actually taking control of the dictionary, tearing down your integrity, stealing your soul. Like, these are big issues going on, and he saw that when a lot of the people didn't. And I think that's another part of his appeal.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And, you pulled up Solzhenitsyn, right? So I think of his book, A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And my other favorite dystopian novel, 1984, which, of course, if you know the end, they win the brain, right? Like, the government destroys the individual completely and utterly. The individual gives over to the collective, and then they kill him. Because it's not about the sky being, what'd you say, green?
Green or the grass blue.
It's about the control.
Right, yeah.
And I remember that ending being like, I had to think about it. Like, why'd they kill him? Because it's not about that.
Right.
It's about the control or whatever, right? And that's this accountability thing. Yeah. We shouldn't push the control up to other entities. We lose all of that. And we shouldn't let other people tell us these things like the pronouns thing, because then you lose that anonymity. I'd look at it like a liberty thing, I suppose. And they're dealing with this in other countries, directly, right?
Yeah.
I think Great Britain is, right? No.
The what?
Great Britain. Didn't somebody recently pass a law up in the British Isle about pronouns?
That you have to use them?
That you have to use them?
I think so.
And J.K. Rowling's like, come and get it.
Yeah, right.
Who's my favorite now because of this? Because she's being courageous when it doesn't seem necessary. And of course, she is royalty.
The female version of Jordan Peterson standing her ground.
She's royalty over there. So, she'll be all right.
Yeah.
She can fight the case.
Yeah, right.
Anyways. So I guess let's come back to the question. Should Christians listen to Jordan Peterson?
I think we've already said enough to say there are good insights from Peterson, and I think there's traits that we should be emulating in Peterson. And I think even if you get into some theological things and the way he, even though he lives in this academic world, that it's not this closed material world like you would think of. He's not this materialistic atheist. He sees the value of story and myth, and that there's something more to this life, and even how he views life as story, I think is interesting, that you don't see in those kinds of circles very much. And so all of that, I think, makes him fascinating. I think you have to be discerning as you're looking at Peterson, as you're reading Peterson. But I think there's enough good things there, enough things we can learn from. And the fact that, again, these are some things the church should have been doing and we failed to do. And these are things fathers should have been doing and fathers failed to do. And we may talk about this later, that made those things can make him dangerous as well if you are undiscerning, if you are immature. I think that's something we have to keep in mind.
You mean building his own cult?
Maybe.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. You're right. People like to follow things. He's courageous, and you know, he's not exactly in line yet. We got to keep praying for him, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think where we started with the virtue of courage. He expressed that, and I think I think men specifically should read Jordan Peterson, but with a discerning eye. I mean, all truth is God's truth. Vet it with Scripture, vet it with our Christian faith, and if the shoe fits, wear it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I say, you know, keep praying for him. He's an ally. You know, maybe the Spirit will bring him all the way over. And discerning but valuable insights. So
we hope you enjoyed this episode of Play the Man podcast. Stay sturdy, friends.